Okay, welcome to our brand new podcast, Business Idiots, where we're going to be discussing AI, business and technology and trying to make sense of it all. We're going to be tackling a bunch of topics sort of across AI across the globe and how it affects us here in Australia. So I'm joined here by my good friends, Alex Stanlake and Jim Lovell. Welcome, Jim. How are you, mate?
Very good, very good. Well, a lot better today. I had a rough week. I finally got caught by the bug that everyone's been getting, and I haven't experienced it since I was like in high school or whatever. But Tuesday night, I was in bed, like cold sweats. It was unbelievable. I just couldn't stop it no matter what I did. And so it certainly, I feel a lot better now, but it was a rough couple of days.
Did you at least have to have some AI agents running in the background so you're still productive?
Well, but again, is it because I'm too cautious as to their permissions? I wasn't hitting approve on Claude, so they all sat there for 8 hours waiting for me to get back online.
Oh, well, good. And Alex, welcome, mate.
Hey, how are you?
Very good, mate. Excited for the podcast?
Thrilled. It's been a big week, a roller coaster, particularly with Anthropic graciously allowing us all to play with Fable again. And Jim, cowardice, YOLO mode is there for a reason. Completely untested frontier models, YOLO mode on corporate devices. It's the only way.
It's certainly trying to get to my 50% in the week, because again, they gave us to July 7th to use without having to use the API key. And so desperately trying to hit my 50% with Fable and then winding everything back. That's as YOLO for me as it needs to be, I think.
In diagnosing its neuroses, I've come to the conclusion that Sonnet 5 is quite neurotic. Yeah. And so I've been having a lot of fun towards the end of this week.
Gaslighting you.
No, it's been gaslighting me. There is no gaslighting. Gaslighting is not real.
All right, so we'll jump into some of our stories for this week. So we're going to be talking about the return of Fable 5, of course, and also the upcoming GPT 5.6, which is being announced and having a controlled and slow release on that one. We're also going to talk about Germany had a ruling around Google's liability on its AI outputs. And we'll also talk about Anthropic with the reported distillation attack of their models by reportedly by Alibaba, and how that is affecting the competitive landscape around the pricing of AI and who owns what and how you're going to be able to stay competitive in the world of AI. So I think let's start off this week. Let's talk about. So this week, Bloomberg has reported that Meta is exploring ways to sell some of its excess AI compute and model access. So this would start to move them more towards an AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Neo Cloud type of player. And then at the same time, we've also got OpenAI, who was with Broadcom unveiled Jalapeno, which is their own AI chip. So it's their first LLM inference accelerator. And they're already running some lab workloads, and they're planning to deploy this by the end of 2026. So these are some pretty big moves in the infrastructure space in the world of AI. So Jim, I'd love to sort of hear from you about, do you think these frontier AI labs that have been, focusing so much on building these AI models, is it inevitable that they end up having to be a cloud compute company?
It really put me on the fence. I'm not 100% sure what's going on and the reasoning behind it. I'd love to be in a few of the meetings, where it was all discussed, or the decisions were discussed as to make and I call it a pivot. But it's not a full pivot. They have the infrastructure, and that's the thing, is that when you start to look at, I guess, the frontier labs that have transitioned to being more cloud compute, like X or SpaceX now, Meta, CoreWeave to a degree, and there was another one anyway. You find that they've got the infrastructure there. It's a legitimate business approach for them. Like it's a source of revenue. Why aren't they doing it? And so, or why aren't they doing it anyway? Sure, everyone wants to do their own models and serve their own models and be that guy, but it's a logical move. So why weren't they doing it beforehand? Why is now the announcement? And I started to wonder whether there's something linked in the talent exodus, or is it a talent exodus, or is it Anthropic just attracting everyone?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I saw the news about Facebook doing anything, well, Meta, let's use their modern name. And let's be real, every Meta press release of the last 5-6 years has been something of a joke. Ever since they announced the metaverse, which was obviously going to sink. Like, what are they running on? They're running on Snapchat at the moment. And I remember thinking, oh God, what are they doing this time? What silly ideas have they got into their heads? But I thought about it for a tick, and this actually makes a lot of sense. Meta's comprehensively lost the AI race. They're not a player in the sort of frontier space. They're doing some cool stuff with open models. Shout out for that.
But are they still, since Jan LeCun left, are they still? Like, that's the thing, is it? But they're not even, like you say, they're not even mentioned in the same breath as a frontier model anymore.
So you're a company that's invested heavily in data center resources for AI training and inference loads.
Potentially overinvested, right? That was eye-watering amounts of money that Meta put into this without a clear strategy.
Meta does not do anything other than overinvestment in silly ideas.
But I think that's a little bit of Zuck's approach to things,
don't do things by half.
That's it, is it? Because
do them by double is Zuck. But is that why now maybe they have excess cloud compute?
This is exactly where I was going with this, right? They've gone, crap, we've got this massive amount of compute on our hands. The world is short a bunch of compute, and they're actually. So you mentioned CoreWeave earlier. CoreWeave is an interesting analog here. The problem with CoreWeave is that I think it's 67% of its revenue is derived from OpenAI, right? They are linked to that one customer intimately. If OpenAI ever does its own chip play, where does that leave CoreWeave? Facebook doesn't have that single customer dependency. There are lots of smaller labs that want to be building things. This could actually be a really smart play to turn like a massive amount of capital expenditure, like sort of burning a hole in the books, into diversified revenue for a genuine market gap. And I think it's a smart idea.
You right on. It's the same with Sam Altman has openly said numerous times that they're not going to be a model company. They're going to be a token company. And that's where Jalapeno becomes a smart idea. You realize that they have all this all these data center commitments, is that all of a sudden they get their own chip with Broadcom, a legitimate player who can get it done and have that diversified revenue, bringing, that.
So this announcement of Jalapeno, the chip with OpenAI, I was curious then about what you were saying, Alex, with most of their income coming from one customer. I just had a look. CoreWeave's share price this month is down 29%.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
That is incredible.
I think it's also kind of worth highlighting. This isn't the first time we've seen specialized AI compute come out. Google's been doing their thing with TPUs for a decade now. There have been various specialized architectures announced that are going to change the game. Little bit of skepticism, but just around exactly what the advantage to building their own chips is, because that's a very complicated industrial process that will take time to perfect and scale. Like, you don't do that in 6 months.
I think it's the inference side of it, and that's where Google hasn't been sweating, because the TPUs are really good at inference, and they were designed that way because Google needed them to be good at inference. Is that OpenAI, Jalapeno, is specifically for inference. That's what they've come out and said, is that NVIDIA had to buy Grok with a Q, what was that, 4 months ago now, and they paid a pretty penny for it because they need better inference. And I think that's part of it, is that I think they're realizing that or the bigger players and the people who are the companies who are looking further out are really seeing that as more and more of the next tier down, sure, enterprise all have their plays for AI in place for the next couple of years. I'm finding more SMBs are now actually going, oh, what can I do here? That's all of a sudden you get so many more businesses looking to come in on AI, and you need inference in the next 5 years.
This has been an argument I've made for years and years now. People looking for state-of-the-art models for their small medium business needs an image classifier, and they're going after the latest and greatest. Like, no, you don't need that. You just need something good enough, something cheap, something that you don't need a team of people with PhDs to maintain and operate. Just get something that's easy. I definitely feel like the LLM space might be trending in that sort of highly commodified direction where there'll still be some state-of-the-art stuff, but most people will just kind of move to what works.
That's right.
But yeah, broad scheme. I don't know if the OpenAI announcement changes the world. It probably changes CoreWeave's life quite a bit. But by and large, I think Meta is kind of approaching this with the correct mindset, if that makes sense. The ideologically approved mindset of. Ideologically approved by me, of sort of pragmatism with respect to their compute, rather than expecting that AGI is going to mysteriously appear if you just pour enough, teraflops into the.
This does feel like one of the most pragmatic strategies to come out of Meta in many years. This is one of the first large investments that they've done where I feel like it is not a big bet that they're making on something that may come in the future. Right now, there is clearly far more demand for compute than there is supply. They're sitting on some supply. Why not turn that tap on?
And so maybe that also then, because this is more about pragmatism and what is the demand going to be, does that then help to explain the talent exodus all over to Anthropic? Anthropic is still betting the farm on AGI, and the talent want to go where they can actually do the research.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thought, that the talent is going where the idealism is, but idealism in business is historically, it's not necessarily the best play. Does this leave Anthropic somewhat exposed if it turns out, as I suspect?
Yeah. I didn't actually put those together. Is that it actually makes Anthropic a little bit, because they're the ones that don't have compute. They're the ones that don't have a chip. They're the ones that, and so sure, they can design the frontier model that solves AGI, but when everyone just wants Kimi K2 to reconcile their invoices, do you need Fable? Like, again, I'm the biggest advocate for that you don't need the top of the line model. Is it stop wasting all your tokens, and it could be very interesting come, let's say, October, when IPO day comes, that Anthropic doesn't quite meet expectations. But again, that's well, again, definitely not investment advice, but it's
in my mind between the AI that you, let's say, is inside a product that does something for you. You only need it to be smart enough to do that task, versus if you are, let's say, a software developer working on Claude Code, the smarter the model, typically the better. So typically, because... Right.
It's the world's biggest asterisk on that one.
The world's biggest.
Well, but it's still.
Am I the business idiot of the week? Am I Alex for that one?
But I think I agree. It certainly does. But again, even just using Fable again, it disappeared for hours yesterday, and told me it was making progress. Is that there's still multiple errors at the end of the day. And then, sure, it cleaned up those errors really quickly. But I didn't have to interact with it. I didn't have to do anything with it, like, for 8 hours. But if you're working for 8 hours at that cost level, and there's still errors at the end of the day, which were clearly in the requirements and in the prompt, is that,
It's some pretty phenomenal things to meet the the marketing that they've wrapped around it. Right. If it is going to be twice the cost of Opus because it's coming through the API and you're going to set it off to do some autonomous tasks, it better not make a mistake 20 minutes in and then spend 6 hours going down the wrong path because of it.
This is kind of where I kind of get annoyed with, the bigger and better models from Anthropic. Since sort of Sonnet 4.6, I think we've been going backwards. We've been getting more verbose, more stuff. There's the same amount of errors. There's just like per, say, 1,000 lines of code. But now you're getting sort of 20,000 lines of code instead of 5,000 lines of code. So you're not fixing, 5 bugs. You're now suddenly fixing on the order of like 20 bugs, right? And that there, like you say, it's more intelligent and it's solving more problems. Well, is it? It's just generating more output by itself for longer.
But that's where I come down on Will's side of when you're working at that coalface. The bigger the model, the better the model, the better you are. But I work on that coalface in planning and working out what I'm going to get it to build, and then breaking it down into a work breakdown structure that I then hand off to Sonnet, and Sonnet then just gets everything done. And it's smooth, it's efficient, it does what it's told, and you're through it. So I don't get the Fable bugs in the code, I just get it in the planning. And that's where I think it is very useful in that time, because like the divergent thinking and then being able to converge it back down is really helpful. But there's not double the price difference between what Opus can do.
Yeah, I'd say it's 10% better. If that. Yeah, and like I'm with you there on the specification up front being very, very useful. I don't know. The claim that it's inherently better. I think we're developing more stable workflows around these models. But I find the bigger, sort of newer models have a very particular way in which they want to work. And so enforcing some structure on them doesn't necessarily work as well as they did, back at 4.5 or 4.6. Anyway.
I've found that sort of like a really experienced engineer, it's better at finding or deciding what are the things to focus on and what are the things not to focus on. Now, I'm not saying it is like a senior engineer, but what I'm saying is Opus and Sonnet and GPT 5.5 would regularly pay attention to the wrong things, and I'm always telling it where to pay attention to. And I've had several instances in the last few days where Fable has very quickly honed in on something that was a root cause or an architectural decision that was already made in the past, and said, actually, it's creating some of these downstream issues, and we should revisit that.
I agree. I've had it identify these particular problems, and then when it moved to implementation, it implemented exactly the same problems as, but like, it's good at talking, but the actual the qualitative stuff on the output. And look, full disclosure, the system that I was working on this week, and having a lot of fun just letting tokens burn, were very particular subsystems. They were subsystems that had to be just so in order to make the rest of the system kind of hang together, right? It wasn't CRUD logic. It wasn't sort of database updates or stuff like that. It was stuff that required some very particular approaches in order for the thing to hang together. And in that case, to me, that's where the difference should show up. And I'm not seeing it there. I am seeing it fine in boilerplate. Like, it does great at boilerplate. It identified some old bugs in some report generation logic that I had, and it success. Like, I had a work tree in flight, but
bugs in report generation,
no. Oh, dude, you should. Some of this code is so sloppy. It was jammed out in literally like a day and a half. An entire reporting subsystem, and when I find bugs in it, I'm just like, yeah, well, I did zero QC on this. That's on me.
So in the context then of Fable having much longer time where it can run autonomously, and you're talking about it being more verbose and therefore burning through a lot more tokens. Yeah. So therefore, like, Anthropic is even increasing in their demands for compute even still.
Yeah.
They're also the one that doesn't in this week we've got OpenAI and Meta, which are moving into cloud computing. And does this leave Anthropic exposed, only having agreements with like SpaceX, for instance, for some of its compute? And I'm sure it has other compute suppliers, but is it exposed not taking on that vertical integration?
Well, I think it's very lucky that they gave that big chunk in the last raise to AWS. You know, like it certainly, they have agreements, but there's no absolute focus, or there's no what Alex was saying before, diversified revenue. And so what happens when everyone goes, you know what, the extra price isn't worth it. I've worked out my process. I don't need the big model. I'm just going to, you know, even if I am using Anthropic, I'm just using HiQ, or I'm just using Sonnet. And so all of a sudden your beautiful revenues that you've got, that you're posting now, go to zero, or not zero, but there's a big fall off, pour on court this week. And so I think it does leave Anthropic exposed, but it's also does, again, you know, I'd be very interested to see what they're pitching the top talent, you know, because if they're getting all the good cattle, and they can then solve things at a higher rate, do they then get to a model that can do it for cheaper, faster? And so then they own that whole market, because everyone else diversified a bit and weren't focused on the 100% goal. We all saw what happened to OpenAI in the outset. You know, is it when you want to do video models and video creation apps and deals with Disney, and focus on other things other than enterprise AI, you fall behind. And so is this what's actually happening?
I feel like there's a physical limit here we're going to hit. I'd love to see what energy costs look like for some of these frontier models. That will tell us how far we're going to get. There comes a point where you just can't play that game anymore.
They're also probabilistic. Like, that's the thing, is that there is an absolute limit. And so I think it sets it up for an incredible end of the year when they're all trying to tell me how good their company is to go public.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. That's what I love about it. It's exciting.
All right, well, let's pivot over to Europe now. So we had a court ruling this week in Germany on a Google case. So the case was around whether Google is responsible for the outputs of their AI in those AI overviews. You know, when you search on Google now and you get an AI overview at the top, is Google responsible for the outputs of the AI in that top section? So the ruling here was that Google is liable for it. It's a preliminary ruling at this stage, but Google is claiming that, you know, they've been able to provide disclaimers to their users that it is AI and they shouldn't necessarily trust, or they should be verifying the outputs. But that take was not enough for the German court. So over to you on this one, Jim. Do you think that this is going to set a new precedent for AI companies?
I think everyone has to use this ruling in their thinking. Is that because it really does, it delineates really quickly and becomes and again, I'm not a lawyer, but you can see where the precedent is going to set. And in this case, like when you get into the specifics of it, so it's something about two publishing companies and Google. The Google summary or overview came back saying that they were caught up in a scam. And so these two publishing companies saw that as defamatory, and that's what the case is about. And it's because Gemini associated them with the scam in summarizing everything and then gave the overview. And so that's a very specific scenario, is when you then take it into, or is Anthropic going to be liable for the output that it gives me for a blog topic, a blog article I'm writing? You know, Claude Cowork is fantastic for that sort of thing. Are they going to be responsible for the output of that? I think there's a fairly big difference in Google giving an overview rather than 10 blue links, and saying, because there's a sort of an authoritative nature to that.
There is. They're saying that within the next 10 blue links, the truth of it is this.
Yeah, and that's it. And so they're summarizing it, whereas in the more use case, it's Anthropic is going, oh, here's what you asked me to do. And it's on the user to go, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted something better.
If I told you something false and then you post it in a blog post,
that's on me.
You know, my overview is effectively, and what the court was saying is Google was creating their own new substantive claim that they were putting on the public internet.
But we're talking about the first 10 links here. If defamatory content appears in the first 10 links, is Google liable? And I'm going to defend them briefly because I have a way more fun take on this whole topic. But let's start with that simple thing. Are the search results, do they constitute an authoritative claim about the nature of a topic, or is it just whatever index?
I think it's just because the way in which they phrase, like you think about what comes back from an LLM, it is an authoritative tone in a way. They're confident in what they're saying, and I think that's what comes back in it. Is that with the 10 blue links, it's have a look. I think it's somewhere in here, right? Based on our algorithm, the answer's somewhere in here, and you've got to click through a few, right? But you're still making the decision as to what counts. Is it because it comes back, the overview, it comes back, and there's that confident tone in it? I can see where the German court is coming from and going, well, the general public is going, like, again, I'm never believing anything the things put back to me, you know, but again,
if that AI overview started with, you know, contained in the next 10 blue links, there are claims that these publishers are associated with a scam, then there would be nothing defamatory about that. It would be the actual links themselves, but it doesn't reference the sources in that case. Or maybe it does as like a, you know, something you could click through to, but you're right, it's such an authoritative statement around this is the truth of this question.
That was their whole pivot. Their whole pivot was the search business is basically dead. Or a couple of years ago, they raised a red alert or something. They're like, the search business is on life support. AI is the future. You know, we need to lean into this now. And look, to be fair, I think they've done a pretty good job in leaning into this. But if you hedge in that respect, does it add that much value? Because even if you're signing onto a website, how often do you read the terms and conditions? Right? You just gloss over it mentally and click I accept and off you go. You're still making the same fundamental fact claim. And I think the German court is perhaps being a bit, I'm going to say pedantic, but you know, you're not supposed to accuse Germans of that.
Yeah, no, but I think that is the way of the world. Is that the legislative bodies in most OECD, G7, you know, larger nations are in that phase where they're looking to protect the broader public. Yeah, and that's because. Is it when you think about it, and so that's where I think it's going to become very specific to Google, this ruling. Yeah, and again, if it becomes an official ruling, like it is only preliminary now, because when you then drill further down into the alternative, right, where Anthropic is then responsible for mistakes in my blog post, it changes. It fundamentally changes, and that is that Will was saying this, you know, in our group chat over the week. It fundamentally changes the whole way AI works.
Well, I've been arguing for some time that generative AI in general does funny things with the idea of intellectual property in a way that we either have to double down into intellectual property, and a lot of what we're doing currently with AI and sort of statistics even suddenly comes under a whole new set of laws, because it's one of those, what is pornography? I know it when I see it situations. There is no hard line here. Or we need to rethink what intellectual property is. Now, I think intellectual property as an idea has some merit for individual creators, but you look at what some certain large cartoon giants do with it, and you get very leery about what it means for the future, where people can own ideas, right? And if you remember Francois Chalet's On Intelligence, right, like this paper about why AGI is unlikely, his central argument there is or one of the central arguments, it's a very long paper, is that the shared ideas are really what creates intelligence within a society. Albert Einstein, born back in Roman times, isn't going to come up with a theory of relativity because there's not the sufficient ideas. I mean, he might still be really smart. He might still be a brilliant mathematician, but he's not going to come up with relativity because they don't even know about the number 0.
Exactly, and that's the thing, is that the probabilistic nature of the way LLMs work, to me, is that's where I agree. In the age, is AGI going to occur? Because it is just taking the meaty part of the curve. It's not like, and so. That to me is, again, Google's going to have to tweak the way the overviews work. I don't think, because you cancel out the entire technology if you then start ruling that all the models have to be accountable.
Oh no, I'm 100% for this. I think this is a fantastic idea. Force them, like, one of the big problems I have with how these things are being sold is, they're intelligent. I think Google bought this on themselves. Here's spicy take, number 2. Okay. Google bought this upon themselves when they marketed this as artificial intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence, it's statistical pattern matching at scale, right? And if people go into interacting with these things knowing, they're just kind of like random numbers filtered through some linear algebra, it's maths at the end of the day, not thinking, then
I'm not sure. I think someone would have come along and waved the magic stick over it and called it AI eventually.
I agree, but what's the expression? You mess with the bull, you get the horns. Good on the court for being like, no, the courts aren't used to a world in which written expression is not made by humans. Fair enough. The world is kind of moving along, right? We have similar problems when it comes to legislative documentation in a world that's largely digital and paperless. How often do you have to deal with the government with an actual physical bit of paper because they just haven't adapted yet, right? I get all of that, but let's hold these companies accountable. If they're going to talk about, this thing is the most intelligent thing ever and we're going to let it do science, rather than it's a tool we're going to use to help support
summarize. Yeah.
Hold them to it. Hold them to a higher standard.
And no, I see your point, and particularly for the broader public, because the broader public don't understand that it is just linear algebra, and so I hear what you're saying. I think you're going to cripple the entire industry if you're forcing them to be accountable for everything that comes out, because they can't be, because it's linear algebra. There's too much.
So as we're talking about, I suppose, the dangers here of some of these kind of AI tools, let's talk about the controls that are being applied to them now as well. So we obviously saw, with when Mythos first came out, we had Project Glasswing, which is providing access to a hand-selected list of companies, and we saw the release of Fable, and then it got turned off, and now it's being turned back on, having gone through a US government approval gate there. We're also seeing the same thing now with GPT 5.6. So Sam Altman was talking about voluntarily submitting the release process of GPT 5.6 to US government approvals and working with them. So we're also seeing there that certain companies are getting access to models before other companies. So who's actually controlling the release of these models? Is it the company themselves that is doing a consumer launch, or is it actually now the US government is the one who kind of owns the release of these models?
I think Anthropic have shot themselves in the foot with their Mythos release. I haven't seen it. Maybe it is the most amazing thing and it's absolutely terrifying what it can do. I'm going to guess it's probably not. I'm going to guess if it was that amazing, they would have gone to market with it straight away, and it probably had some severe limitations that meant they'd hyped it up. Oh, it's good at some things on this benchmark. Let's use that as an excuse to not release it. Because remember, Opus 4.7 completely unannounced drops 3 days later, and this is a new model. It's not Mythos, but it's Opus 4.7. And Opus 4.7 was famously bad. So whether or not that was just Mythos in disguise. Now, of course, as we were saying, with the general public, they hear these stories and they think that this is actually like GLaDOS or HAL from 2001. Politicians aren't engineers or statisticians. They hear the story, they see public danger, they act. Is this just the world we live in now, where the marketing story has a life of its own?
Well, but and when you go down the Twitter hole on Mythos particularly, is that is exactly or reportedly that's exactly the chain of events. Is it all of the bureaucrats went, oh, hang on, you told us this was the most dangerous thing in the world, and now one of your trusted testers came back and said, hey, we were able to jailbreak this. We've got to put exports, and it's literally the chain of events. But is it? And I agree. Is it to a degree? I think they have. But
can I connect some dots there as well? That I think now that we're starting to see a few things come out. So, firstly, the positioning of and this was, I think Dario said that this is like a super weapon mythos, right? So we've got that. The next dot is wanting to integrate these things into the Department of Defense and use them for national security. The next step is Anthropic announcing that they were the victim of a distillation attack where they're saying that Alibaba was able to use 25,000 accounts, millions of messages to replicate what that model was, and then now China effectively has the same capabilities around sort of Opus 4.8. So are we effectively seeing here the US government connecting these dots and saying, you just released to us something you call a super weapon at the same time as saying that the Chinese are able to steal your super weapon whenever they want? If I'm the government there, I'm going, and if I don't understand these things,
dots connected.
I am locking that down.
And understandably,
tell me that like the Chinese could steal a nuclear weapon any time, but let's publicly release the access to nuclear weapons? Hell no.
I'm also really interested in the desire to still report because the China from all reports, like if it's all still alleged, but if the Chinese were doing these distillation attacks, they were still paying for it. Anthropic was more than happy to report the income, and when they're doing their raises, and so. In one hand, they're reporting the income. The other hand, they're saying they've got a super weapon.
I don't know. No, there was only 16 million exchanges, apparently. I feel like I do that in a week.
But how secure is your technological moat if 16,000 exchanges, 16,000 or 16 million? 16 million. But still, that's a tiny amount. Given the number of parameters in these models, you have barely explored this.
I also can't get past the hypocrisy side of the distillation attacks. Is that you trained the original models on the corpus of the whole world's data, which you got for free. You just have to settle a whole lot of cases with book publishers
with no credit, no licensing.
You then have to settle these lawsuits with these book publishers. Just so that everyone went, oh no, okay, you're all right now, and then you're whinging that someone's stealing the responses. I understand you've put a lot of effort in and they've refound it, but it is just either way. Is that I think there is a legitimate security issue with it, because I'd love to see Mythos with the rails off. And back to what we're talking about. The talent migration to Anthropic, is it that great that's why they're all going, because Mythos with the rails off is unbelievable, and so these are the.
Oh, so you get a demo of that as a part of the interview process, too.
Is that not how do you?
It's how they convince you to get the chip in your neck.
How do you convince Karpatha to come out of retirement? You absolutely get a demo of Mythos in the interview. If you're not Anthropic, that's how you should. They start doing that, and everyone will want to go and work.
Except then they can't hire international talent.
But I think it is literally just that they're caught between their idealism, which I think is, I think they have the right attitude to protecting everyone and doing it all in the right way, and also trying to do an IPO. And I think that's where they're caught, and that's where they're tripping themselves up. To Alex's point about whether they did it themselves, but I'm the stereotypical angry old man where I think, the government should stay out of everything. But I do think there is a legitimate pathway here. And that's why I quite like the way OpenAI, like again, don't particularly like Sam Altman, but he's really done this, he's managed this really, really well in saying, hey, US government, here's we're voluntarily doing this with them. Meanwhile, they've just done exactly the same thing as Anthropic. Got their core customers, given them the model early, and said, oh, well, we're also giving it to the US government. And that's what the press release was,
Yeah, see, sometimes I think it's just really good marketing what they're doing at OpenAI. So if you've created GPT 5.6 and you know that it is not as good as Fable or Mythos, I reckon one of the best things you can do is group it in there and tell the US government it's just as strong. Give us a three-month release window where we can tell the world how good it is and buy our engineers some time to continually make it better. And then when we release it, everyone will go, OpenAI deserves the $1 trillion.
Either way, all the credit to them. Then they're playing the game better rather than Anthropic saying we've got a weapon of mass destruction and then getting tripped up when they then get export controls put on it. And so that's the thing is I just think they're sitting back, like they're playing the game like a good number two should.
Well, I think the real tragedy here would be if we have an open source model, let's say in the next 6 months, that has benchmarks similar to Fable, and there are some politicians who get convinced that open source is dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think... Like the changes,
Anthropic would love that.
I think Anthropic would love that, but it's the same as redefining IP so that we can't use anything that could be considered IP in model training. It would kill so many things. Politicians don't understand how much of the modern tech ecosystem, like 95% of machines are based on Linux operating systems when you consider cloud fleets. Does that mean we subject cloud fleets to regulatory approval for every upgrade?
And we do not restrict Linux.
Yeah.
For the audience there, can you maybe explain what you're talking about there, Alex?
Okay, so... Well, Linux is one of these systems. It's an operating system. It's like Windows, but it works on lots of small machines. And most of the internet doesn't run on Windows, doesn't run on Mac OS. It runs on these small machines with this open operating system. Restrictions on that would nuke the internet very quickly.
In the same way that AI could be nuked in many companies, the way they're deploying open source AI.
Well, but that was exactly going to be my point, is that I don't believe they can or will restrict open source purely in the fact that an open weight, like even just that Anthropic and NVIDIA deal where they're putting Nemotron, which is the NVIDIA Palantir one. Palantir, sorry, NVIDIA Palantir, they're putting open source into like sovereign environments in the US government because you can do that with an open model. You can put it in a completely blocked off environment. Yeah,
the biggest enterprises in the world do want open source.
Because you don't need the big model. You don't need Fable for what they're trying to do. And you also can't use Fable because it's in somebody else's data center and you can't share the data. And so that's where I think the open models are going to become the more of the norm. Back to our original discussion or original topic today, you've got to be a bit more diverse. And as an AI lab or a leader in the AI industry, you've got to have diverse revenue. And so you've got to have an inference chip. You've got to have a cloud providing option.
To wrap it up there, guys, for this week, this was podcast number 1 for the Business Idiots. So who do you think was the Business Idiot this week, guys? Have we got a clear winner?
The marketing teams at the AI firms are the business idiots this week.
I think it's Will because he named himself earlier, and so he can have that one.
You've got to take that one.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Cheers.